That's a name.
What's that?
I was just commenting on the name.
Zelophehad?
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Okay. Yep. So last week we started this last section of Numbers. That was really Numbers 26. And we talked a little bit about the census. Okay. So Numbers 26 is about the census. So to kind of put this in perspective, we're kind of at the end of the second 40-year jaunt. Folks are getting ready to um, uh, hopefully settle in the promised land. Okay, so that first generation that decided that they did not want to settle in the promised land have all but gone on, and we have a new group. And so God calls for a new census. And we kind of talked a little bit about the new census in the sense that, what was its purpose? And one of the purposes was, if you look at it, these are all men that are of military fighting years to kind of give them a hint that they are of sufficient numbers to go in and take the land. And so that's kind of a practical kind of reason to have the census. But if you think about it, any other reasons that we could think about a census? Maybe not so much from a practical standpoint, but does it have something to say, maybe theologically?
Oh. Well, the way you asked the question, obviously the answer is yes, but I don't have the reason.
So, so one of the things we need to think about is I asked you last time to kind of go back to the beginning and look at the numbers, during the first census and compare them to the second census. And so if we compare the first census and the second census, they're about almost
Yeah, they were
almost
pretty much
equal.
equal.
They were
Yeah.
close. And so if you think about it theologically, what does that have to say?
God didn't allow them to grow.
Okay, okay, we could look at it that way, that God did not allow them to grow. Or could we, what would our anticipation maybe be if someone were wandering around in the desert for 80 some years?
God didn't allow them to die out either.
Yeah, yeah. So you could say, okay, God didn't allow them to grow, but we could also look at it on the flip side, saying, okay, the punishment was to wander around in the desert for all these years, and even despite being out in those harsh environments, God did provide, and God continued to bless. And so that God, theologically, we could say that from this section that God is a God that continues to bless and watch over his people a bit. All right, and so then we really didn't get to this second section, this section in chapter 27. That's the one that I have teed up. And in this section, it talks about inheritance laws. And we're going to look at Numbers 27, and we're going to read 1 to 11. Okay, so you can follow along. This is the English Standard Version. Then drew near the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, from the clans of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. The names of the daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest, and before the chiefs and all the congregation at the entrance of the tent of meeting, saying, Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among the company of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah. Okay, Remember, what was Korah all about?
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Remember, they kind of rose up. It was the priests.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, remember that? Okay, and they got kind of swallowed up. Okay, so
Yeah.
okay, so he was not among that group, so he didn't get killed because of that, but died for his own sin. And he had no sons.
Oh.
Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers. Okay, so as we think about that, what's the challenge here?
Well, usually,
Inherit.
Okay, Jeanette, I heard you talking. What were you saying?
Daughters don't inherit.
Okay, daughters don't inherit. Sue.
I've said the same thing, changing the inheritance laws.
Okay, so there's a challenge here. So the challenge is that we have a certain set of inheritance laws. And what do you think the normal inheritance law is?
It goes to the oldest son.
Okay, it goes to the oldest son, second son, third son. And if we don't have any sons,
Your brother.
okay, it goes to brothers. Okay. And so,
Nephews.
what's that?
Nephews, cousins.
Nephews. It's a very patriarchal system. Okay. And so here we have a conundrum. And the conundrum is that there are no sons, and we have some daughters who are a bit up in arms about it. And so as it goes on, it says, Moses brought their case before the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, the daughters of Zelophehad are right. You shall give them possession of an inheritance among their father's brothers and transfer the inheritance of their father to them. And you shall speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall transfer his inheritance to his daughter. And if he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. And if he has no brothers, then you shall give the inheritance to his father's brothers. And if his father has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to the nearest kinsman of his clan, and he shall possess it. And it shall be for the people of Israel a statute and a rule, as the Lord commanded Moses. Okay.
so the inheritance laws originally then were just devised by the people themselves. God wasn't involved with that.
No,
That-
they came from God.
When before he changed it, they came from God.
Yes.
Okay. Huh.
But
Yep,
it's
these-
so interesting here
Yeah,
that
I don't-
God is changing his mind.
Yes. Like God knew this would come, so why wasn't that from day one then?
I
Maybe
think,
nobody ran out of funds.
well, I know, I look at it from a different perspective. I think that he was establishing a pattern, a patriarchal or a male-oriented society, because the males were the protectors and they were in the wilderness. So they needed to have that structure. I think that the structure is changing. They're becoming more sedentary, or they're going to be more sedentary. So women would be able to like have land and possessions and things like that. That before, I think it was different.
It's interesting though that verse 8 does not say, and you shall speak to the people of Israel, saying, not if a man dies and has no son, you shall transfer the inheritance to his daughter. But when a man dies, the inheritance goes to the firstborn child. It's just interesting that wasn't said.
Herman, what's that phrase? Hell hath no fury of a angry woman or something like that?
A woman's scorn.
Yeah, so maybe this was like version 1.0 of that.
You don't give it to me, you're going to be in a world of trouble.
What would have happened to his daughters if they didn't get an inheritance? Would they
Scorned.
would they be considered like a widow, like how they were treated, or
They,
Wouldn't they've gotten married and then it would be,
if they
Well-
got married? But
yeah, the hope is that you would get married and kind of you would move on. But so if they did not inherit, in some ways they were kind of at the whim of whoever was in charge of that clan.
I remember years ago, we talked about, we were in the New Testament, it was about Jesus' trial, but we were talking about how, for that time, how incredibly progressive Jewish law was. There was no other nation on the face of the earth that had, at the time, that let women inherit.
Mm-hmm. So I before we kind of move off here a little bit, I'd like Herman said something that was very insightful. So what do you think about Herman's insight? Herman, why don't you remind them again?
It was, so initially the males were the ones that protect the clan or the group or the family. So it's a male-dominated society. So it was more protective. They were roaming around in the wilderness, and this was the right time. They were about to settle in the land. So the structure was going to change. So I think it was the right time for them to bring this up and for women to have a little bit more say in what the family inheritance was,
Yeah, that's why I asked the question I did, or made the comment that I did, because if it is true that, new rules are being established as you move into the promised land, and now you're, settling somewhere, that verse 8 could have said, okay, let's change it up totally, and it's now not just the first, the son, it's the
firstborn.
Firstborn, no matter whether it's a boy or a girl.
Yeah, well, I think that would have been too radical of a change in
Maybe.
ideology. It was still
The first
the
son.
first son.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if there were no sons, then the thinking was going to change. The perspective was going to change. So then it was a change in the mindset. So
Mhm.
rather than, a strict law, straight law.
So what does that say about our interpretive lens when we're looking at these laws?
That he's a fair God.
Okay.
In fairness, he's sharing regardless of gender.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
God
that's
can change the laws too, based
okay.
on what's going on.
Okay, so I think that's probably one of the important things that we have to remember is that, the laws aren't draconian to be, kind of, this is the law and this is what it is in perpetuity. That in some ways, as we think about the laws are being,
They're fluid with the times.
they're interpretive. Yeah, they're fluid with the times, interpreted in this in regards to the context in which the people are living, so that in some ways they really become not so much the law as in, okay, this is where it needs to be, but in the sense, okay, this is foundational, and let us now begin to have dialogue, and be meditating on these and what's the intent of those laws. So first thing that we have to think about is context then. But Mark brought up something else that's kind of important, and that is the idea of justice. Okay. And what is biblical justice all about?
Well, I think the women were being, for lack of a better word, discriminated against for something they had no control over.
Okay.
They
I'm sure
couldn't
they
they
all
couldn't
worked
control
very
their
hard.
gender.
I'm sorry, Mark.
No, they couldn't control what their gender was. Why should they be punished just because they had no control over it?
Okay.
They all worked very hard to contribute to the success of that plan,
Okay.
and it was going to be poof.
I think biblical justice is about,
Fairness.
well, restoration and like redemption. So not saying it's an eye for an eye, but that, sort of humans, back in the garden sinned and there had to be restoration and payment for that. Like it couldn't have just gone by with a pat on the head and okay, do better next time.
Okay. So one of the challenges that we have is that there's a patriarchal system that's in place. And if we think about that patriarchal system, is that what God had originally intended?
I think so.
Well, didn't he refer to Eve as a helpmate? It wasn't like she was exactly equal with him. She was just a helpmate.
Okay. What do other people think?
I think they were both equal.
Okay, so I got
the
one vote for a hierarchical system and one vote for an equal system.
They never said Adam was the boss of her.
No,
Yeah.
but they
Maybe,
referred to her. He
maybe
referred
they
to
had
her
different
to Eve.
jobs. Maybe they had different jobs in the garden, but they had
Right.
equal responsibility and equal authority.
My grandfather always referred to my grandmother as his helpmate, and he was the boss. So,
Okay.
A lot of times we like them to think they're the boss.
oh, absolutely.
There you go.
So what other people think about that?
Wasn't this the transition away from chattel?
Away from chattel?
Yeah, that the woman is the man's possession.
Okay, I got what you're saying.
It's less that and more equality and partnership.
Yeah. I'm trying to
Oh yeah, that's where I am too.
yeah,
Should be right in the
Trying to-
beginning.
They didn't do a very good job of it then because it didn't really get finished until the 1920s.
I think you're past it.
what right here?
Verse 27, God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them.
I was looking in Genesis chapter 2. Verse 18. And it says, then the Lord God said, it's not good that the man should be alone. I will make for him a helper fit for him. And if we look at that word there, and if you look, can you see the information panel there? Off to the right. All right, so that kind of looks at that word. And that word it's the word in Hebrew. A helper, a succor, whatever that, supporter, rescuer, working together in conjunction. And so, I think if we think about this, and if you kind of go down further, we get this idea. When we think of the word helper or help meet or whatever words you want to use there, the helper is used in the ESV, the NASB, New Revised Standard, NIV, New Living Translation. Helper is used in most of the translation. Help meet is in the New King James in the King James Version. But then what happens? So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, he took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh, and the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. Then he said, "This is this last bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. I will call her woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast his wife, and they shall become what?
One flesh.
One flesh. It's not two fleshes. It's not one flesh that's better than another. They would become one flesh.
And if you go back to chapter 1, though, in the Reader's Digest condensed version of all that, in chapter 1, verse 26 and 27, there is nothing that says that one was created before the other one.
Right. And it says, what does it say? And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock and over all the earth.
Mm-hmm.
It says, let them.
Yeah, well, because in 27, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created a male and female, he created them.
Mm-hmm. So if we're looking for an idea of biblical justice is really the affirmation that every one of us has value, every one of us has worth, every one of us is made in the image of God, and every one of us is made to have our vocation, this vocation that's here. And so in some ways, if we think about, as things move forward out of the garden, what happens outside of the garden walls? Things become a little bit perverted. And so we run into this idea that, we have this hierarchical system. And so now, as we get back to, Numbers 27, we have this issue that we have an issue of justice. Okay. And if we have this issue of justice, it's like, okay, is God concerned about justice? The answer is yes, he's concerned about justice. And, in some ways, did God change his mind? Or was it that, God was now allowing, that broken system and become more aligned with what he originally called for?
I think everybody came to the conclusion that wasn't necessary anymore.
Okay.
I can see why it had been. I mean, women, at least from their late teens till their early 40s, were just having child after child after child. They were stuck there caring let's face it, we're smaller, we're not as strong. They were probably beset by other tribes. They needed to be defended. And now they're going to be moving into a walled city where it's not going to be as dangerous.
Yeah. Well, also, what does this passage teach us about addressing gaps in justice and fairness?
There's always room for change.
Okay.
God is ready to say, like in verse 7, the daughters of Zelophehad are right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
God will take care of it.
Yeah. Well, in some ways we have to think, okay, what would have happened if these daughters would have just remained silent.
Mm-hmm.
They would have gotten married, and everything that they worked together, supposedly with their father for, built up. I tried to say this before, but built up the whole estate or whatever it is. Now their husbands are going to have it, and they might be from a different tribe.
Or they may be assimilated by the rest of the family, the extended family.
Mm-hmm.
So from my perspective, I think God was saying, well, it's about time, guys.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, Herman. It's what is doesn't necessarily mean that's God's intention. Because remember, we're living outside of the garden. So we're living in broken relationships. We're living in a broken creation. It's not exactly what God had intended. And yeah, I think I was, yeah, hey, about time you figured that out. But it took someone, in this case, it took a daughter of Zelophehad.
5 of them.
To speak up and to name the injustice and bring it before the God.
Isn't it always that way, even now?
Yeah, and that's where we're going to go with this. That in some ways, it's incumbent a lot of times upon us as Christ followers to name those injustices and bring them to light. Because if we don't, what happens? We have status quo that continues to move on and live on in its oppressive ways. Any other thoughts about that section?
Maybe it was never brought. Yeah, maybe it was never brought up before because there wasn't a situation where there were no sons. Maybe this was the first occasion.
Could be. We don't know. So, all of this stuff, as we think about it, we think about the census. Now we think about the inheritance laws. All of this stuff is being talked about in relation to moving into the promised land. We're moving from desert dwellers to promised land people. And if we kind of move a little bit further down in this chapter, verse 12 through 23, we have Joshua to succeed Moses. It says, the Lord said to Moses, go up into this mountain of Abraham and see the land that I have given to the people of Israel. When you've seen it, you shall be gathered to your people as your brother Aaron was, because you rebelled against my word in the wilderness of Zin, when the congregation quarreled, failing to uphold me as holy at the waters before their eyes. These are the waters of Meribah of Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. So Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation who shall go out before them and come in before them, who shall lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord may not be as sheep that have no shepherd. Oh. Where we have that heard that before?
Sheep that have no shepherd?
Yeah. Where's that? Where do we?
The Psalms.
Yeah, Psalms, Jesus.
That's
Jesus.
later though.
That's yeah, okay. I was trying to push you towards Jesus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
I thought you meant like it before in the Old Testament.
And bad question. It was a bad question. It was a good question in my head. It was a bad question out of my mouth. But okay, think about that. So when Jesus is talking about sheep without a shepherd, this is one of the places, this is a hyperlink back to what he's talking about, because in some ways, Jesus was seen as the new Messiah. Okay. And so the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Make him stand before Eleazar the priest and all the congregation, and you shall commission him in their sight. You shall invest him with some of your authority, that all the congregation of the people of Israel may obey. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire for him by the judgment of the Urim before the Lord. At his word they shall go out, and at his word they shall come in, both he and all the people of Israel with him, the whole congregation. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and made him stand before Eleazar, the priest, and the whole congregation. And he laid his hands on him and commissioned him as the Lord directed through Moses. All right, so we have this little section here, and what do we have happening? The transfer of power, the transfer of leadership from Moses to Joshua. Now, what do we already know about Joshua?
The son of Nun.
Okay, he was the son of Nun.
He wanted to go into the promised land originally when he went to scout it out.
Okay.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, so
Caleb, right? Was it
right.
Caleb?
Remember there were 12 spies that went out? Okay, 12 spies came back. 10 of them said, no, we shouldn't go inherit the land. It's too scary, too many people. Only 2 of them said, yes, we should go in the land. That was Caleb and Joshua. Okay, so this is Joshua. All right, and so as you think about that, then Joshua is the choice. So what do we think the qualities are that make Joshua a fitting successor for Moses?
he's
Trusted
old.
God.
Okay, Sue, I thought I heard you.
He trusted God. God
Okay.
told him this was what to do, and he said, okay.
Okay, trusted God.
There's a lot of people there. We'll take care of it.
Okay.
He's been around and he's seen what's gone on, from everything with like the golden calf stuff to up to now. So he's not a really young guy with no experience. He's kind of witnessed all of this stuff.
Okay, so he's experienced.
Who chose Joshua?
God.
I did. He was in good standing with God. He
It wasn't Moses that picked him?
Pardon me?
God's picking him right here.
All right.
Yeah, so Moses, if you look at verse 16, let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, point a man over the congregation. So the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, son of Nun. So if we think about this, okay, we have Joshua who is experienced, Joshua who can see the power of God. What does God say about Joshua?
He says he's a man in spirit.
In whom is the Spirit. So he's a spirit-filled person. What does it mean to be a spirit-filled person?
He's led by the Spirit. He is letting God lead him and
Okay.
not following his own ambition. Yeah.
I was going to say he's more spiritual.
Okay. What
That's
does
redundant, isn't it?
I was
He's
going to say,
the spirit, but he's spiritual. So it's
I
like
was,
that
and so
for me.
and
Go
so
ahead.
when we use that word, we say spiritual. What does that imply? What does that mean to us?
I guess more connected with God.
Okay, connected with God.
He's not interested in being the king of this land to be the king of the land. He's interested in leading the people because that's what God wants him to do.
Okay.
Did he even know it at this point, though? I mean,
Did
this
he-
is God and Moses talking.
What was that, Sue? What did you ask?
I said, yeah, he is interested, I'm sure, in just leading the people because that's what God wanted him to do. But I think at this point, he didn't know it yet.
Mhm. Right.
It was only Moses and God that were hashing this out.
That's a great point. So what else does that say about Joshua as a leader?
Well,
He's humble.
the general told him what to do and he did it.
Okay. So, in some ways, would if it were you, would you want to be the leader?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
No,
You wouldn't want Joshua as a leader?
No, that's not what I said. I said, would you want to be the leader?
Oh.
Not of these people.
Well,
listen, I'm only the leader of like 5 or 6 people, and it's like herding freaking cat.
yeah, it's one of those things. It's as you think about it, you think about what has gone on before, and I think if you think about the previous generation and now think about this generation, a lot of the same things, the same kind of things come up, the same foibles, the same insecurities, the same issues, sins, whatever you want to call them to be.
There's always somebody who thinks that they can cure it all, that they can change, make people change and change the world they're in. And, so maybe he was
better than you.
Yeah. So in some ways,
And
it's like,
this time it's going to work.
Yeah.
yeah, right. What's the definition of insanity?
Keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Over and over again.
Yeah,
Expecting different results.
right. So in some ways, it speaks volumes that Joshua, would rise up and take the mantle of leadership from Moses. Because you think about it, it's you got all these people and they don't have a real good history of complying. They don't have a real good history of really embracing their leaders. They kind of come up against them. So in some ways, it really does speak volumes about Joseph and Joshua and his character. And
I
really,
just keep thinking, Joshua, the first time he heard about it, he must have been saying, why?
yeah.
What are you doing to me? Take this cup away from me.
Yeah. Because it's and you think about it, it's not just the people. He's been in the land, and so while he says yes, we should go, I'm sure at the same time he probably was not naive in the sense that there's a lot of people there that are going to be pretty irked that you're trying to take the land from them.
Of everything that I have learned studying numbers here, the one thing that just never occurred to me, I guess, is the fact that there were other people living there and the Jews were coming in and taking over. I don't know why I thought it was just a land set aside by God that he was putting these people in. I didn't realize that they were shooing other people out to claim the land. I don't know why. Never dawned on me.
My guess is that that occurred over and over and over again. So my thinking is that they were probably very tribal, and depending on who was the ruling king or who was the stronger one, that would absorb others. So it was this turnover of power or of possessions in the land, and the people were probably pretty similar. So, and when they would fight each other, they would really conquer each other and get slaves. So the idea of, because I was struck with the same thought, that they were coming in and just kicking other people out.
No.
And kicking other people out. But I think that what they were really planning on doing was populating the land and really settling and being the more permanent residents with a permanent structure rather than a temporary.
The Jews.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my thinking.
That makes sense.
Well,
I just didn't realize that they were going to be kicking other people out.
Yeah.
Well, and the people in the Middle East are to this day still angry about it and trying to get their land back.
Yeah, that sort of puts a different light on things. I mean, not that I'm anti-Jewish or anything like that, Israelis, but it just makes you think, yeah, okay, now I get it a little bit more. I'll never get it, but okay.
So, if you look at Europe, it happened the same way. And if you look at America, it happened the same way. People will come in and come and then settle for a period of time, and then somebody else comes in and takes over. So it's the way of humanity.
I guess.
Yes, it is. So as we think about Joshua's appointment, how does his appointment reflect God's ongoing care for his people?
Well, he takes care of them and he's fair.
Okay.
Well, just Moses is first of all, Moses had well, there was a point where he faltered a little bit. And there's a successor coming in place, that God's always going to provide for the people a leader filled with the Spirit, sort of no matter what happens.
Yeah, because they're leaders in training.
Okay. Well, that's good. So, I just because my head is filled with all kinds of poison from all of these election advertisements. I was trying to watch the news, and you just can't watch
hit
the
mute.
Yeah.
Just hit mute.
It would be muted most of the time. So does this speak to us as believers in this time?
And how would we recognize somebody with the Spirit?
Yeah, and please don't misunderstand me. I'm not, my thing as I'm thinking and I'm reflecting on this, I'm not reflecting on it in the sense that, which one of these candidates is
No.
Joshua? Because I think neither one of them is Joshua. But what I'm kind of thinking is how much time, how much energy, how much hate, how much insecurity, how much of that stuff is all wrapped up in an election about, a candidate, when we know from this that God raises up, God is in charge, and God will raise up leadership, maybe outside of a presidency, to lead God's people. You know, and you know, it just to me, I see a lot of people, you know, that are sparring back and forth, and you know, spreading evil and hate and not nastiness, when it's like, you know, we're so focused on, you know, the person as a rescuer, when it's not the person that's the rescuer. It's God who is the
Isn't
rescuer.
it said that do not put your faith in princes?
And principalities.
But didn't also God use people for that we would never guess he was using for good, like David, or you know, that David ended up being in the line for Jesus.
And he used oppressors like the king of Babylon.
Yeah.
And Paul.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, in modern day, I think a lot of the hatred and stuff is stirred up by the news media, and that goes for both sides. I mean, I've said this before. I remember the Kennedy and I think Nixon. I was in elementary school, and you know, Kennedy was it was about a Catholic versus, you know, Protestant, and most of my friends were Catholic, but we didn't hate each other. We didn't, you know, stop talking to each other because they were Catholic and they wanted Kennedy or whatever. I just think, of course, I don't remember watching the news much in those days, but I remember it spilling out onto everybody. I mean, I think the news media takes a lot of it and spins a lot of it that not necessarily for good. So it's just hard to decipher today what's real and what's true and what's not true. My feelings.
Yeah, I agree.
Reading this stuff and thinking about, you know, these folks, it makes me think about heroes. And like, if I was listening to some article the other day that really made me sad. It was talking about children and when you ask little kids, you used to ask little kids, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they would say, I want to be a firefighter, an astronaut, or these things, you know, doctor. But now that the majority of kids are saying they want to be an influencer, like a social media influencer or a YouTuber. But these are the people that they see as leaders, people who are, you know, influencing others. It's just something to think about.
Well, look at the Kardashians. I mean, they say the influence that the Kardashians have on young people is, you know, young women especially. It's awful. But yeah, here we are, you know. I remember Rowan was, I don't know, elementary school. I was over their house getting ready to take her to school. She came down the steps and she said, "Who do I look like?" And I said, "I don't know. Who do you look like?" And she said, "Nicki Minaj." I said, "Not hardly." But that's what she, you know, I have no idea even hardly anything about her at the time, you know. And oh my gosh, no. But yeah, it seems like that they have so many outside influencers. Yeah.
All right. As we kind of move through the rest of the chapter, we're now getting ready to go into the land. So if we look at kind of Numbers 31, it records the conquest of Midian as part of Israel's preparation for entering the promised land. And then if we go to chapter 32, we have the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh request to settle on the east side of the Jordan. Moses agrees and provided they help in conquering the land. So we're going to look at that one and come back in a minute. Then in chapter 34, we have the boundaries of the land, and it gives specific instructions for dividing it amongst the tribes. 35 is the provision of cities for the Levites and the establishment of cities of refuge, showing God's concern for justice and mercy. And finally, in chapter 36, it revisits the inheritance laws and making sure that the land stays within the tribes, even if daughters inherit. All right, so they're the that's the last section in kind of the conquest of the land. And so
Jesse,
yeah.
to Nancy's point, the boundaries and stuff that are laid out in those two chapters that you mentioned, how do those things line up with the area of land that is being fought over currently in the Middle East? Is it a direct overlap or somewhat overlap, or it's not related at all?
It's related, but if you think about the land, hold on a second. Let me see if I can come up with a map. Tribes of Israel.
It's just incredible if it, just to think about the things we fight over as humans, and if it is this goes back to that, and just like, I don't know, why can't we all get along?
Hold on a second. So how can let me see. I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to share this map. Okay, everybody see the map?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the map of where they are. So I mean, your question is about, the fighting today. It would be in a smaller section of this, that if we look at how things were set up, they what they were doing was they were coming in from over here and going into the land. Okay, so the area that fighting is in the Fertile Crescent there. Okay,
Point to it again. Where is it?
Fertile Crescent's over here.
Over there.
So, but
Okay.
it goes all the way up here from, up here where Tyre and Sidon are, all the way down here to where Judah is. If you think about there's Bethlehem right here, and there's Jerusalem. So this whole section
Bethlehem was
down
in the West Bank.
Huh?
I thought Bethlehem was in the West Bank.
It is, but what they were asking, she was asking about the fighting, and it's the biblical footprint is bigger than bigger than the area that the fighting is in.
So the area of the fighting's within that biblical footprint, though.
Right, exactly.
That
Yeah.
that's just incredible to me. I mean, it's just so incredible.
Yep. So as
Gaza, like down here, I'm looking at down here in the southwest border.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So
Oh, I see it there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more in the southwest. So as we think about this happening, then I'll keep on the map for a second, and we get back to that God says that they're coming in from this side, and they're supposed to come in across the river Jordan into the promised land. So this whole area here is the promised land. Now, when we think about the promised land, how was it divided? Okay, so as it was divided, it was given pieces of land sort of, if you think about the size of the land, was really predicated upon how big your clan was, how big your family was. But where you were situated was done by lot. Okay. So for example, Manasseh, you see Manasseh, it's in green there. It was a very large family. Judah was a large family, but so they got a bigger piece of real estate, but where that is fell to Lot. Okay. But that's how things got set up. So, the tribe of Judah was down here. And so when we talk about Judah and Israel, okay, Judah is going to be this section, and when they become a nation, the Israel is up here. Okay, so that's just kind of what it looks like.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. If the promised land was supposed to be crossing over the Jordan,
yeah,
why were they allowed, Reuben and some of those others allowed to be on the?
We're going to get there.
Oh, okay.
So
Sorry.
remember, the intention was for everyone to cross over the Jordan. So everybody is going to be on the left side of the Jordan. All right.
Right.
We got that. All right.
Yeah.
And so everything was going to be set up, the amount of land, the sort of the size, the square footage, if you will, was predicated upon your size. But what part of the promised land that you inherited was done by lot. Okay. And so let's look at chapter 32 for a minute.
Right. I was in that chapter, and that's
here we have now the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and a very great number of had a very great number of livestock. And they saw that the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, and behold, the place was a place for livestock. So the people of Gad and the people of Reuben came and said to Moses and to Eleazar, the priest, and to the chiefs of the congregation, Aratoth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Eliah, Sebam, Nebo, and Beon, the land that the Lord struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. And they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for a possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. Okay. So we get that.
Yep.
All right. So what do we have happening here?
Grumbling.
We have grumbling. Okay.
They don't want to do what God is telling them to do.
Okay. They don't want to do what God's told them to do.
They like the land that's there.
Okay.
And they don't think it's fair.
All right. Well, they don't think it's fair, or what else? So what do we see happening here?
Well, they think that area is prime for their livestock, so they want to remain there because of that. It's not really that they don't want to go across to the promised land. They're thinking of their future.
Well, they're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about themselves.
True. True.
And they won't have to fight.
Right. And
That's what I was just thinking.
Well, actually so that Moses kinds of thinks about that. And here it's, but Moses said to the people of Gad and to the people of Reuben, shall your brothers go to war while you sit here?
Yeah.
Why will you discourage the heart of the people of Israel from going over in the land that the Lord has given them? And so, one of the provisions that they make is that, the tribe of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh will need to fight. Okay. So, you can inherit that land, but you you need to help us conquer the promised land. But think about that for a minute. What kind of thing is happening here?
They need to be united.
All right, they need to be united.
I mean, in a way, compared to what we just read about, they want to negotiate, sort of like saying, "Hey, as the daughters did of the person whose name started with a Z, we would like to inherit. Do you think you could reconsider?" So now these guys are saying, "We would like this land. Do you think you could reconsider?"
Yep. So think about for a minute. Where are they supposed to be going? Into the
Promised land.
Promised land. And what does the promised land what's it supposed to represent? We think about this idea, we're kind of have gone through, a big hunk of the Torah. And so what does the promised land represent?
Well, it's part of the covenant.
I heard somebody say, I think it was Sue. Did you say Eden?
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's the idea of the promised land is going into Eden. Okay. Going back into Eden, back into the garden. And what do we have? We have a subset of God's people that are doing what?
They don't want to.
Refusing to go into Eden.
Snake-like.
Huh?
They're snake-like.
Or snake-like. So they don't want to go into the promised land because why? They perceive that land is better land than what they're going to get on the other side of the Jordan.
Well, it's just like we can eat of this fruit. We don't need all the other fruit.
Yeah. So in some ways, what do we see here? We see a hyperlink.
Yeah.
Back to the garden. The same kind of thing that was happening back in Genesis is happening here. That even God has invited them into the promised land. And they say, no, you can have this fruit. You can have all this fruit, but no, I want to eat of
this one. Yeah.
That fruit.
They think they know better.
They think they know better. And so, it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. So we see as we're kind of getting ready to end this section of our study that the echoes of Eden still echo on then, and they still echo on now.
Echoes of Eden would be a good title for a book. Maybe you should start putting your sermons in a book, Jesse. That sounds like a good title.
It actually sounds like a soap opera.
That's true too.
Well, maybe someday. So, this is the end of Numbers. I hope everybody has gotten something out of it. Next week we will start Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, I believe, is going to be it's supposed to be an 8-week study. I broke it down in 8 weeks. I think I can get through each section in 8 weeks, but if not, it'll be, we'll chunk them up a little bit more. But we'll finish up Deuteronomy, and then we'll have finished the entire Torah, and we can figure out where we want to go from there. Okay. So let me where's the recording? Let me stop my sharing.